of him because a lot of things happen behind the curtains that people are not privy to, and I'm proud of his endurance, his understanding. You can't control a lot of things that transpired.
What's going on?
Honored to see you, sir.
How you feeling? Well, we're glad to have you. Are we taking care of you? You need anything? Let's have 12 play well today, right? All right. Good to see you, man. Hey, guys.
I'm like a kid in the candy shop. It's like your babies out there that you cut the umbilical cord. Now they doing their thing. I just can't wait to see him get down tonight. It's gonna be a problem after the night, though. I promise you that.
Sorry, pops. I ain't do what I was supposed to do fully, but we'll live to see another opportunity.
The Cleveland Browns just did something that nobody saw coming, and the NFL has no idea how to respond. For decades, this franchise has been the place where quarterback dreams go to die. First-round picks buried under dysfunction. Heisman winners swallowed by chaos. The Factory of Sadness earned its name through decades of heartbreak, and the entire league got comfortable laughing at Cleveland's expense. But something shifted, something massive. And what's happening behind closed doors right now has executives across the league losing sleep. This isn't just about drafting Shedeur Sanders. That was only the first domino. What's reportedly being discussed inside the Browns organization goes far beyond a rookie contract and a depth chart. Sources suggest the front office is exploring an arrangement so unprecedented that the league office has already started asking questions.
They're extremely passionate, and they deserve better than what they've gotten the last 2 years, okay? No, I don't need to say anything else. We are going to give you a better product. Our sole goal here is to be a consistent winner, not make the playoffs in 20 and then make it again in 23, not win 8 games in 2 years. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not acceptable. Our fans.
He had to do what he had to do, and he made it through the storms. And I'm proud of him, man. As a father, I'm proud of him because I know,
We're talking about a potential power structure that could redefine how influence, money, and family loyalty operate in professional football. The numbers being whispered are staggering. The implications are even bigger. And at the center of it all stands one man who refuses to let his son walk into the NFL unprotected. This is the story nobody expected, and it's only getting started. For over 30 years, the world has known one version of Deion Sanders. The flashy cornerback who announced himself before the snap. The man with gold chains, gold sunglasses, and gold jacket confidence. Primetime never flinched. Primetime never showed weakness. Primetime performed when the lights were brightest and walked off the field like every stadium belonged to him. That persona was carefully constructed and fiercely protected. Every interview, every sideline moment, every viral clip reinforced the same image: unshakable confidence, untouchable swagger. A man who operated on a frequency the rest of the world couldn't access. But something happened recently that cracked that armor wide open. And the moment was caught on camera for everyone to see. It happened during a youth clinic in Boulder. Deion wasn't wearing the persona that day. He wasn't performing. He was standing on the sideline watching something unfold that triggered an emotional response nobody expected from him. The context was simple but heavy.
Now I want to turn our attention and talk to our fans, okay? And I want you to hear this, okay? First of all, ownership takes full responsibility for where we are. To win 8 games in 2 years is horrible. It's totally unacceptable, okay? And it's not going to continue, okay? And I want the fans to know we are as frustrated as you are. And we hear a lot from our fans, which we actually appreciate. We have great fans.
No, I can't wait to go see him play. Can't wait to, and he's like, when you coming to a game? I said, when you play. What am I going to come and see you sit? I can watch that on TV. I'm not going to see you sit when you play. I'm coming.
Shedeur Sanders was about to step into a situation that could define his professional future, and Deion couldn't hold it together. He later admitted what happened behind closed doors. The tears came hard and fast, so overwhelming that he asked his oldest son, Deion Jr., to leave the room because he couldn't regain his composure. Think about that for a moment. The most confident man in football history asked his own child to step out because he was falling apart emotionally. That wasn't weakness. That was a father recognizing exactly what was about to happen to his son. Deion Sanders understands the NFL better than almost anyone walking the planet. He knows the violence. He knows the politics. He knows how quickly the league can break a young quarterback if the environment around him collapses. And he knows Cleveland's history better than most. This franchise has chewed up talented quarterbacks and spit them out with alarming consistency. The list is long and painful. Names that arrived with hope and departed with scars. Careers that should have flourished but withered under pressure, instability, and dysfunction. Deion has watched it happen, not from a distance, up close. He's seen the film. He's heard the stories. He understands what happens when a young signal caller gets thrown into chaos without protection, without structure, without a support system designed to help him survive. That's what triggered the breakdown, not fear about Shedeur's talent. That debate doesn't exist in Deion's mind. His son can play at this level. The arm is there. The processing speed is there. The poise under pressure has already been tested against some of the best defenses in college football. Talent was never the question. The only question that haunted Deion was whether Cleveland's environment would sabotage his son's potential before it ever had a chance to breathe. Would the offensive line protect him? Would the coaching staff adjust when things got difficult? Would the front office stay patient when the inevitable rookie struggles arrived? Those questions don't have easy answers, and Deion knows it. The emotional moment revealed something critical about what was coming next. This wasn't a father hoping for the best and trusting the process. This was a father preparing to intervene, to insert himself into the situation in whatever capacity necessary to ensure his son didn't become another cautionary tale. The tears weren't just sadness, they were fuel. Motivation, a reminder of exactly why he couldn't sit back and watch from a distance while the NFL did what it does to young quarterbacks. That moment changed everything about how the Browns approached this situation. The front office saw the emotion. They understood what it meant. And they recognized an opportunity that went far beyond just adding a quarterback to the roster. If they wanted Shedeur Sanders to succeed, they needed to address the elephant in the room. They needed Deion involved. Not as a distant observer, not as a supportive father watching from the stands. They needed him embedded in the organization in a way that gave him real influence over his son's development and protection. And that's where the conversation reportedly started to take a very unusual turn. The Browns weren't just thinking about a rookie quarterback anymore. They were thinking about a package deal, a father-son arrangement that could provide Cleveland with something they've lacked for decades. Stability, leadership, and a cultural identity that demands respect. But what they were about to propose would send shockwaves through the entire league. The NFL has a reputation for eating young quarterbacks alive. Not every franchise, not every situation, but enough of them that the pattern is undeniable. And Cleveland sits at the top of that list. This is the franchise that watched Baker Mayfield arrive with swagger and confidence after going first overall. The same Baker Mayfield who led a magical playoff victory that had fans believing the curse was finally broken. That moment felt like the beginning of something special. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. What happened next was a slow-motion disaster. Coaching changes disrupted continuity. Scheme adjustments created confusion. An injured shoulder was mismanaged to the point where Mayfield was throwing wounded while the organization publicly questioned his toughness. The relationship deteriorated. The production collapsed. And within a few years, the quarterback who was supposed to save Cleveland was gone, carrying bitterness and frustration with him to his next destination. Then came Deshaun Watson, a trade that mortgaged the future, a contract that guaranteed more money than any player in league history at the time. The Browns went all in on a quarterback who was supposed to finally end the positional nightmare. Instead, they got controversy, rust from time away from the field, injuries, and performance that never matched the investment. 2 franchise quarterback swings in a short window, 2 painful results, and a fan base left wondering if the position was simply cursed in Cleveland. Deion Sanders watched all of it unfold. He studied the patterns. He recognized the warning signs, and he understood something that casual observers often miss. Quarterback failure in the NFL rarely comes down to a single factor. It's almost always environmental. The physical talent at that level is usually sufficient. These are elite athletes who have proven themselves at every previous stage. The difference between success and failure often comes down to protection, both literal and organizational. Does the offensive line give the quarterback time to process? Does the coaching staff put him in positions to succeed? Does the front office provide weapons and resources? Does the locker room culture support growth through inevitable struggles? When those elements align, young quarterbacks flourish. When they fracture, careers end prematurely. And Cleveland has fractured more than most. That history weighs on Deion, not because he doubts Shedeur's ability to handle pressure. His son has already proven he can stand tall in collapsing pockets. At Colorado, Shedeur operated behind one of the most porous offensive lines in major college football. Defenders came through untouched with alarming regularity. The pocket rarely held for more than 2 seconds, and yet Shedeur kept delivering throws that made scouts lean forward in their chairs. He absorbed hit after hit. He got back up every single time. He never lost composure. He never stopped competing. That resilience wasn't taught in a classroom. It was forged through survival. But college football and the NFL are different animals. The speed increases, the complexity multiplies, the margin for error shrinks dramatically, and the consequences for organizational dysfunction become more severe. Deion knows that a quarterback can be ruined in 6 games if the circumstances align against him. Bad protection leads to happy feet. Happy feet lead to poor decisions. Poor decisions lead to interceptions. Interceptions lead to benchings. Benchings lead to confidence collapse. And suddenly, a prospect who entered the league with limitless potential becomes damaged goods with a questionable future. That cycle has played out countless times across the league, and Cleveland has seen more than its fair share. The fear driving Deion isn't about whether Shedeur can compete with NFL defenses. The fear is about whether Cleveland's infrastructure can support him long enough for his talent to translate into wins. Can the Browns provide stability when things get difficult? Can they resist the urge to panic when the rookie growing pains inevitably arrive? Those questions don't have guaranteed answers, and that uncertainty is precisely why Deion reportedly refused to approach this situation passively. He didn't want phone calls and weekly check-ins. He didn't want to hear about his son's development secondhand through media reports and press conferences. He wanted presence, influence, the ability to step in when things started going sideways. From Deion's perspective, this wasn't about ego or control for the sake of control. This was about protection, about ensuring that the NFL machine didn't consume another talented young quarterback before he had a chance to prove what he could become. And Cleveland's front office apparently understood that position. They recognized that getting Shedeur Sanders meant addressing his father's concerns directly, not with promises and reassurances, with structure, with commitment, with an arrangement that would guarantee Deion's involvement in a meaningful way. That's when the conversations reportedly got interesting. That's when the numbers started getting discussed. And that's when the rest of the league started paying very close attention. What the Cleveland Browns are reportedly proposing goes far beyond anything the NFL has seen before. And that's exactly why league officials are already raising concerns. According to multiple sources with knowledge of the discussions, this isn't a traditional coaching hire. It's not a front office position with a fancy title and limited responsibilities. What's being described is something entirely different. A hybrid role that combines influence, presence, and organizational power in ways the league has never formalized. The rumored figures attached to this arrangement are staggering. Reports suggest discussions around compensation that would place Deion Sanders among the highest paid individuals in professional football, regardless of position or title. Some whispers put the number at $25 million per year. Others suggest incentive structures that could push it even higher. Those figures alone have executives choking on their morning coffee. But the money isn't even the most controversial part. What has the league office truly concerned is the structure of the proposed arrangement. Sources indicate that Deion wouldn't be functioning as a traditional head coach. He wouldn't be the primary play caller. He wouldn't be wearing the headset and making game day decisions in the conventional sense. Instead, his role would center around development, culture, and protection. Specifically, protection of his son's path through the early years of an NFL career. The league sees this as a potential workaround. A creative structure designed to funnel organizational resources toward one family under the guise of a non-player contract. That framing has raised red flags at the highest levels of NFL governance. Roger Goodell's office has reportedly been briefed on the situation. League officials are examining whether this arrangement violates the spirit of existing regulations. Some have suggested that it functions as an indirect competitive advantage that other organizations cannot replicate. Not because they lack the money, but because they lack a Hall of Fame parent willing to attach themselves to their child's career in such a formal capacity. The Browns, meanwhile, appear undeterred by the scrutiny. Sources close to the organization suggest they view this as a business partnership rather than a football hire. That distinction matters legally and structurally. By positioning the arrangement outside traditional coaching frameworks, Cleveland may be attempting to sidestep certain limitations that would otherwise apply. The goal, according to insiders, is to integrate the Sanders brand directly into the Browns' ecosystem, not just as a player and his father, but as a unified cultural identity that transforms how the franchise operates, recruits, and presents itself to the world. This isn't about Deion showing up on Sundays to pace the sideline and offer motivational speeches. His proposed role extends into every corner of the operation: player development, locker room culture, media strategy, recruiting pitches to free agents, brand partnerships. The scope being discussed is remarkably comprehensive, and that's where the league's concerns intensify. If this arrangement functions as described, it creates a template that could fundamentally alter how influence and compensation operate in professional football. Other families with Hall of Fame connections might pursue similar structures. Organizations might start bidding for legacy involvement rather than pure coaching expertise. The NFL thrives on competitive balance. Salary caps exist to prevent wealthy owners from simply buying championships. Draft order exists to give struggling franchises access to elite talent. Revenue sharing exists to ensure small market teams can compete financially. This proposed arrangement threatens to circumvent those structures in ways the league never anticipated. And that's why the response from New York has reportedly been swift and pointed. Sources suggest the league has already communicated concerns directly to Cleveland's front office. Some reports indicate formal warnings have been issued. Others suggest the league is preparing contingency responses if the deal moves forward as currently structured. But the Browns appear willing to absorb that friction. Jimmy Haslam has reportedly expressed exhaustion with the franchise's losing culture. The jokes, the memes, the constant ridicule from national media. Decades of dysfunction have made Cleveland a punchline, and Haslam is apparently ready to absorb whatever backlash comes from pushing boundaries. This move represents desperation mixed with ambition, a willingness to break established norms in pursuit of something the Browns haven't experienced in generations. Relevance, excitement, a reason for the rest of the league to take them seriously. The risk is enormous. If the league successfully blocks the arrangement or forces significant modifications, Cleveland looks foolish for overreaching. If the deal goes through and the results on the field disappoint, the circus atmosphere becomes a distraction that damages the organization for years. But if it works, the payoff could be historic. A franchise transformation that rewrites the rules of how football operations can function. A model that other ambitious owners might attempt to replicate. And most importantly, a winning product on the field that justifies every controversial decision. That's the gamble Cleveland is apparently willing to take. And the rest of the league is watching with a mixture of fascination and fear. Beyond the financial figures and structural controversies, there's a simpler question that Cleveland's front office has apparently already answered. What does Deion Sanders actually bring to an NFL organization? The answer goes far beyond X's and O's. Deion Sanders transforms culture overnight. Every program he's touched has experienced an immediate shift in identity, expectation, and external perception. At Jackson State, he took a historically overlooked program and turned it into a national storyline. Recruits who would never have considered an HBCU suddenly wanted to play for Prime. Media coverage exploded. Attendance spiked. The entire SWAC benefited from his presence. At Colorado, the transformation was even more dramatic. He inherited a program that had won one game the previous season. One game. The Buffaloes were irrelevant, ignored, and completely off the national radar. Within months, that changed entirely. Colorado became the most talked about program in college football. Every game became an event. Every press conference generated headlines. The brand was reborn. That's not coaching in the traditional sense. That's cultural alchemy. The ability to shift perception and energy through sheer force of personality. Cleveland desperately needs that energy. For decades, the Browns have operated under what insiders call a misery tax. When pursuing free agents, Cleveland typically has to overpay by significant margins just to get players to consider the destination. Cold weather, losing history, media pressure, organizational dysfunction. All of these factors push the price tag higher. Star players have historically avoided Cleveland. They've taken less money to sign elsewhere. They've demanded trades rather than accept the Browns as their destination. The franchise has been viewed as a career burial ground rather than a launching pad. Now imagine what changes when Deion Sanders is part of the recruiting pitch. Imagine a top-tier wide receiver hitting free agency. His agent is fielding calls from multiple franchises, including Cleveland. In the past, that would be an easy elimination. The Browns would be crossed off the list before serious negotiations began. But what happens when the phone rings and it's Prime on the other end? What happens when Deion walks into the living room, sits down across from that receiver, and starts painting a vision? What happens when he says, "You're the missing piece. You're going to be featured in the most watched offense in the conference, and I'm going to make sure you're protected, developed, and positioned to succeed"? That's a fundamentally different conversation. That's not a desperate franchise begging for attention. That's an opportunity to join something special. The misery tax potentially disappears overnight. Suddenly, Cleveland becomes a destination rather than a last resort. Players want to be associated with the Prime brand. They want the spotlight that follows him. They want the energy and confidence that permeates his environment. And then there's the business case. The financial upside that Cleveland's ownership has reportedly calculated carefully. Even if the on-field results take time to materialize, the ancillary benefits would be substantial. Merchandise sales would spike immediately. Shedeur Sanders jerseys would fly off shelves. Primetime branded Cleveland gear would become a national phenomenon. The combination of generational nostalgia and current relevance creates a marketing opportunity that few franchises could replicate. Television ratings would follow. Networks crave storylines, and there's no bigger storyline in professional football than Deion Sanders entering the NFL in a formal capacity. Every Browns game would become appointment viewing. Primetime slots would multiply. The advertising revenue implications are massive. Ticket demand would surge. Cleveland Stadium would transform from a half-empty monument to past failures into a sold-out celebration of newfound relevance. Season ticket waiting lists would grow. Premium seating would command premium prices. The Browns could finish with a mediocre record and still become one of the most valuable, most watched, most discussed teams in the league. That's the power of the Prime effect. It transcends traditional metrics of success. Critics will argue that entertainment value doesn't equal championships, and they're not wrong. But championships require sustained investment, cultural foundation, and organizational belief. All of those elements become easier to build when the franchise is generating attention, revenue, and interest. Winning eventually follows relevance, and relevance is exactly what Deion Sanders provides in abundance. Cleveland's ownership has apparently run these calculations. They understand the financial upside. They recognize the cultural transformation potential. And they've concluded that the investment, however unprecedented, represents a bargain compared to the value Deion Sanders brings to the organization. The rest of the league sees it differently. They see an unfair advantage, a shortcut that can't be replicated, a precedent that threatens the competitive structures they've spent decades building. But Cleveland doesn't seem to care about those concerns. They're focused on one thing: breaking the cycle that has defined their franchise for generations. And if that means rewriting the rules of how NFL organizations operate, they appear ready to do exactly that. The moment Shedeur Sanders throws his first interception in a Cleveland uniform, the critics will sprint to their keyboards. The narrative is already written, waiting to be published the instant something goes wrong. Nepotism, favoritism, protection. The accusations will flood social media within seconds of any negative outcome. Every incomplete pass will be scrutinized. Every sack will be analyzed. Every questionable decision will be attributed to privilege rather than the normal growing pains every rookie quarterback experiences. The storyline writes itself, and it's not subtle. He's only playing because his father is there. He's protected from criticism. He's shielded from accountability. The organization is compromised. The coaching staff is influenced. Nothing Shedeur accomplishes will ever be truly his own. That narrative is coming. It's inevitable. And anyone who thinks otherwise is ignoring how sports media operates. But there's a significant problem with that predetermined storyline. It collapses completely the moment you actually watch the film. Shedeur Sanders wasn't protected at Colorado. He wasn't shielded from pressure. He wasn't operating in some comfortable bubble designed to manufacture impressive statistics without real resistance. The reality was precisely the opposite. Colorado's offensive line was among the worst in major college football. The protection simply didn't exist for large portions of games. Defenders came through gaps untouched. Edge rushers won their battles before Shedeur could complete his dropback. The pocket collapsed almost immediately on countless snaps. And yet Shedeur produced at an elite level. Study the film closely. Watch what he does when the pocket disintegrates. There's no panic, no happy feet, no wild decisions born from desperation. He processes the chaos calmly, relocates, and still delivers throws that make evaluators lean forward in their seats. The arm talent is obvious. The ball jumps out of his hand with velocity that translates to the next level. The accuracy is exceptional, particularly on timing routes that require anticipation and precision. These aren't manufactured traits created by a dominant supporting cast. These are skills demonstrated repeatedly under the most difficult circumstances. Shedeur absorbed more hits than almost any quarterback in the country during his college career. He got back up every single time. He never lost composure. He never started pointing fingers at his linemen or his coaches. He never made excuses for the circumstances surrounding him. That's the part critics conveniently ignore when constructing their nepotism narratives. This isn't a quarterback who has been shielded from adversity. This is a quarterback who has already lived in chaos and emerged sharper. The concerns about Deion's involvement miss a fundamental distinction. Protection doesn't mean elimination of challenges. It means ensuring the environment gives talent a chance to develop rather than actively working against it. There's a massive difference between a father trying to prevent his son from ever facing difficulty and a father trying to ensure his son doesn't get sabotaged by organizational dysfunction. The first is coddling, the second is common sense. Deion isn't trying to guarantee Shedeur's success. He knows better than most that success in the NFL can't be guaranteed. The league is too competitive, too unpredictable, too relentless. Even the most talented quarterbacks fail regularly. That's the nature of the sport. What Deion is apparently trying to prevent is unnecessary failure. The kind that comes from bad coaching decisions, unstable organizational leadership, or environments that crush confidence rather than build it. Cleveland's history is littered with examples of unnecessary failure. Talented players who arrived with potential and departed as cautionary tales. Quarterbacks who could have succeeded elsewhere but were ground down by dysfunction. Deion sees that history clearly, and he's determined to ensure his son doesn't become another chapter in that sad book. The critics will still attack. They'll dismiss every good performance as product of favorable circumstances. They'll amplify every bad performance as proof of their thesis. The noise will be constant and loud, but noise doesn't change film, and the film tells a clear story. Shedeur Sanders is a legitimate NFL quarterback prospect who earned his position through years of demonstrated performance against increasingly difficult competition. His father's presence doesn't change the throws he makes. His father's influence doesn't alter the processing speed he displays. His father's involvement doesn't manufacture the poise under pressure that has characterized his entire career. Those who reduce this situation to simple nepotism are either not watching carefully or not watching at all. They're substituting narrative for analysis. They're choosing the easy story over the accurate one. The reality is more nuanced. A talented quarterback is entering a historically dysfunctional organization. His father, who happens to be one of the greatest players in NFL history, wants to ensure the dysfunction doesn't destroy his son's career. That's not privilege. That's a completely rational response to clearly documented organizational problems. And if Cleveland actually addresses those problems through this arrangement, the results will speak for themselves. Statistics don't lie. Wins don't lie. Performance doesn't lie. The critics can load their narratives now. But they might want to wait and watch before firing. One of the most persistent questions surrounding this rumored arrangement is whether Deion's approach can work with professional players. The skeptics have a seemingly logical argument. College athletes are impressionable. They respond to energy, enthusiasm, and the celebrity factor. But NFL veterans are different. They're grown men with families, mortgages, and bodies that ache every morning. They've heard every motivational speech. They've seen every coaching gimmick. They're not easily impressed. The concern sounds reasonable on the surface, but it fundamentally misunderstands what Deion Sanders brings to a locker room. When Deion speaks about football, he is not delivering motivational platitudes pulled from a coaching textbook. He is not running through PowerPoint slides filled with corporate buzzwords. He is not offering theoretical concepts developed in meeting rooms rather than on actual fields. When Deion speaks, he speaks from experience that cannot be replicated or faked. He is a Hall of Famer. He played the position at the highest level against the greatest competition of his era. He won championships. He dominated games. He delivered in moments when everything was on the line. That matters enormously in professional locker rooms. Consider what happens when Deion explains how to read a safety's leverage. He's not guessing. He's not theorizing. He's recounting what he did thousands of times against quarterbacks trying to figure him out. He knows what adjustments work and which ones fail. He knows the subtle indicators that reveal coverage intentions. He knows because he lived on the other side of those battles. When he discusses baiting a cornerback into a false step, he's describing techniques he perfected against the best receivers in NFL history. He understands the chess match between corners and wideouts because he played it at the highest level for over a decade. That voice carries authority that transcends age, salary, or years of experience. You don't ignore someone who is enshrined in Canton. You don't dismiss advice from someone who owns a gold jacket and 2 championship rings. That credential cannot be purchased or manufactured. Veteran players understand exactly what that credential means. They know how difficult it is to reach the Hall of Fame. They know what sustained excellence looks like because they're trying to achieve it themselves. When someone who actually accomplished it speaks, they listen. Not because they're told to listen, because they recognize the value of the perspective being offered. This isn't a motivational speaker addressing athletes. This isn't a former player trading on past glory while offering empty inspiration. This is specific, actionable football knowledge delivered by someone who mastered the craft. There's also a leadership element that can't be overlooked. Deion demands accountability. His standards are extraordinarily high. He expects effort, preparation, and professionalism from everyone around him. Those expectations aren't softened by celebrity status or family connections. They apply universally. Players recognize authenticity. They can identify when a coach is performing versus when a coach is genuine. They know the difference between someone chasing a paycheck and someone chasing excellence. Deion's entire career was built on the relentless pursuit of being the best. That mentality is obvious in everything he does. Some veterans might initially bristle at the energy and enthusiasm. Some might view the college-style atmosphere with skepticism. But those reactions typically fade quickly when the substance behind the style becomes apparent. The substance is real. The knowledge is deep. The experience is unmatched. What Deion offers isn't just motivation. It's mentorship from someone who has actually walked the path these players are trying to navigate. He understands the mental challenges of performing at the highest level. He understands the physical toll the league takes. He understands the politics, the media pressure, and the constant evaluation. That understanding creates connection. It builds trust. And trust is the foundation of effective leadership in any professional environment. Will every veteran immediately embrace Deion's presence? Probably not. Some players are set in their ways. Some prefer quieter leadership styles. Some will resist simply because resistance is their default response to anything unfamiliar. But the majority will recognize the opportunity. They'll understand that having a Hall of Famer invested in their development is a rare privilege. They'll absorb the knowledge being offered. They'll respond to the standards being set. And most importantly, they'll perform. Because performance is ultimately what matters in professional football. All the leadership theories and locker room dynamics become irrelevant if the product on the field improves. Deion has proven at every stop that he elevates the environments around him, not through magic, through setting expectations and holding people accountable to them, through bringing energy that becomes contagious, through providing insights that only someone with his background can offer. There's no reason to believe that approach fails at the professional level. If anything, it might work even better, because professional players understand exactly what Deion accomplished. And they know that understanding the game at that level is worth more than any slogan or speech. The veterans will listen, and if they're smart, they'll learn. What's unfolding in Cleveland isn't a routine personnel decision. This is the most extreme experiment professional football has ever considered. A high wire act suspended over a burning pit with no safety net below. If this works, the transformation will be immediate and historic. The Cleveland Browns would become the single most successful turnaround project in global sports business history. A franchise mocked for decades would become must-see television. A punchline would become a destination. A cautionary tale would become an instruction manual. But if it fails, the collapse will be spectacular and public. The circus atmosphere will overshadow everything. The critics will celebrate being right, and Cleveland will be forced to start over again with wounds deeper than before. There is no middle ground here, no quiet outcome, no soft landing, and yet one thing is already certain. Nobody will be able to look away. Not the fans, not the media, not the other owners, and definitely not the league office. This isn't just about football anymore. This is about power, protection, and whether the NFL is ready for a new kind of arrangement. Cleveland is betting everything that the answer is yes. Now the entire league waits to see what happens next.